So you mentioned the by age 30, total testosterone decreases by about 1% per year. And then you mentioned even
in general,
right. On average. Like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where I was going to ask you.
I have absolutely seen 7-year-olds with, 900 total T's.
So the question is then, like, there are lifestyle factors that really can sort of modulate that, general decrease or not. So maybe you can accelerate it or maybe you can slow it, right? And I kind of want to dive into some of those lifestyle factors. Like, what should men avoid or try to minimize in terms of their environmental exposure or lifestyle factors that are known to accelerate the decline in testosterone and or increase the binding proteins so there's less free testosterone, right? Anything that's going to necessarily regulate the ability of testosterone to exert its, its function, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I would love to bang out an exhaustive list, but forgive me, I guarantee we'll miss something. But like alcohol, the direct toxicity effects of that does inhibit actual steroidogenesis in the testicles themselves. It will also impact sleep dramatically, which has the vicious backhand effect of, inhibited output of signaling hormones, which indirectly will also impact body composition, which, the whole downstream cascade of that. Smoking, obviously not helpful.
How much alcohol? Is it like any amount or like light drinking, moderate drinking?
I think obviously the safe answer for me is to say no drinking. I think it would be more like a dose dependent toxicity effect and what is your capacity to handle it, because ultimately the testes are very affected by oxidative stress. And if you're not capable of handling that adequately, like it will reflect in your inadequate output of hormones locally. So I would love to give like hard and fast numbers, but there are a lot of people who will be able to get away with like murder and probably be okay. Then there are some guys who like, you might be low normal function to begin with. And like that, couple drinks a week, like, throws off your sleep a bit and kind of pushes you over the edge. Like it all depends. It is very much a spectrum. So like going from like optimal to like blatantly hypogonadal from a symptom perspective, it's not like it's just on versus off. Like your way there is it's transition of, shittiness as you arrive to that like worst case scenario. So other things I could point to, if you have a totally fat deficient diet, I think that's, of a macro distribution that would be reflective of something that's almost certainly going to hinder your capacity to produce hormones. Also, if you have a void of carbohydrate intake diet, it would also be something that would inhibit freely circulating hormones from liberating themselves. And lack of protein, like you would not be able to produce, get as robust of a response recovering from workouts and be able to build muscle, which indirectly is going to improve body composition and improve your hormones as well. So it's all kind of like balanced diet. Don't eat bad. Micronutrient intake, I could definitely point to if you're deficient, and not every mineral or vitamin is going to be, game-changing, dramatic impact on your test levels, but things like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, like these all have a marked impact on your testosterone, either response to it or capacity to produce it, or even like you mentioned in our podcast, a conversion of vitamin D into active vitamin D. Like you might think you have adequate vitamin D status via your dose you're taking that's super high, but you're not actually utilizing it, but you think you are. And that's impacting your testosterone production and your response to it at the androgen receptor itself as well. So I think from a minerals and vitamin standpoint, the low-hanging fruits are typically going to be like B vitamins, but in particular, like from a mineral side, you have, magnesium, zinc, and the vitamin D3 are going to be three things that specifically on top of the minerals and vitamins that everyone's familiar with from multivitamins and whatnot are more difficult to get in adequate doses. All but zinc is typically adequately in many multivitamins, but the magnesium in particular almost never is because of the weight of it. You would be having to take a multivitamin that's like 8 to 10 capsules otherwise, which just nobody does. And then the vitamin D, it's fat soluble. Typically, you're going to have it in like a soft gel or something, and it's not always going to be at the dose you need. in the multivitamins. It's just worth noting. So those are just some low-hanging fruits that are, if you don't look to those as part of your micronutrient optimization strategy, like you could be overlooking low-hanging fruit that like is a deterioration of 100 plus nanograms per deciliter per deficient micro, potentially, depending on how severe the deficiency. Other things I could point to, being obese, like the worst one probably that I probably should have mentioned first, but is like so dramatically impactful on your negative feedback to the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So by that, I mean men who are obese and women, if you have a significant amount of fat, it is going to elevate your aromatization, which is, your conversion of testosterone to estrogen. And this is more impactful in males because of how the brain gets signaled from estrogen, not testosterone, directly as significantly. There's a bit of a nuance there, but in general, like you need adequate estrogen to tell your brain, okay, we're good. You don't need to make enough more testosterone because I have enough estrogen. Like that's kind of like the downstream cascade of these metabolite conversions is you produce testosterone in order to produce other things too. And the estrogen is a very potent mediator of telling your brain we're good. And if you have a significantly elevated amount of estrogen being converted from your testosterone that you make because of how much fat you have, you are basically achieving the proportional increase in estrogen that is much higher than the amount of testosterone substrate that led to that conversion. So you have that signal telling your brain, okay, we're good, but the amount of testosterone you actually had to begin with was not good. So that's problematic. People who are obese have, upwards of, I would love to give hard and fast numbers, but it could be like significant, like half of a reference range, maybe, it could be the differential between you being, the quality of life of you're fine versus you're blatantly in, severe deficiency. And what else could I point to?
What does weight loss do to those levels? Like if you are someone that's obese and then you lose weight, does that bring you back?
Yeah, as long as you are losing, ideally, like visceral fat, and like overall fat loss is going to be very supporting of getting that ratio back into balance of your estrogen and the amount that's converted to estrogen, estradiol in particular. And once that balance is favorable because you are leaner, you will have a balanced amount of feedback to the brain that then regulates like the perfect homeostasis between, okay, now we have adequate testosterone and estrogen. So you will actually notice more testosterone being produced because it realizes to get this signal that we deem adequate, we had to produce more testosterone to get that amount of estrogen. So there's this Goldilocks zone. Of course, you can't just, become, a malnourished, low, like bodybuilder shredded person and just continue to get this elevation in proportion. It's at some point you will end up essentially starving your body of the nutrients needed to actually support hormone production. But in general, guys who are, like 12 to 15% body fat ish will find that they have a increase in testosterone dramatically relative to when they were obese. And it's like super significant in how much it will improve hormone status.
I wanted to get your opinion on endocrine disrupting chemicals. Like how have you, or has your your company looked or seen anything, or do you have any speculation into like what the scientific literature has shown in terms of them affecting hormone levels?
Yeah, I think we're pretty convinced that there is an effect. It's just the magnitude at which you often see hyped up, I think, maybe over exaggerated. There are low hanging fruit things to absolutely avoid, like don't use, plastic Tupperware and like heat it up and stuff like that. Try and use glass when you can. Try and ensure you have like high quality air if possible. Like pollution, I think, is a big factor for like your body's capacity to deal with stress, and like the allocation of resources to be chronically dealing with a toxic environment will inhibit systemic, like broad systems. water quality, like if you can make sure you have like decent water, I think that'd be solid. But as far as like the actual magnitude of impact of those things, for most people, I think is going to be relatively negligible in contrast to like the obesity, the diet, the exercise, the sleep quality, the potential carcinogens that might be exposing themselves to. Some of the lifestyle stuff is like way more important to be addressing as like the base infrastructure before you start thinking about like, oh, it must be my like shower that is like shooting chlorine at me. Like it must be that, or sure, get a shower filter, but like it's not going to be the game changer. I do think avoiding like the basics though, like, switch to glass where you can, don't use plastic water bottles, stuff like that. And there is blatant evidence showing interactions with estrogen receptors with some of these compounds, as well as androgen receptors, which in turn will impede the ability of the actual hormones you produce to bind to those receptors and do what it needs to do. So you're like essentially competing with yourself for activity in the body. Like you're, competing with these like, even if they're like moot activity compounds, they still act as like anti-androgens or anti-estrogens via their occupying of receptors. So to whatever degree they are, doing it at all is not ideal because it's inhibiting like space that could be occupied by actual endogenous hormones that you need to produce and need to work properly. And you don't want to be competing with like environmental toxins to like do things in the body.